I recorded this 3 times because the first 2 times stopped recording after 5 minutes, but I kept talking for another 20 both times.
Hey everyone! You download the template. I'm super excited because I'm a big nerd who gets really excited when people track their expenses and budget and just take control of their finances because I'm a finance geek. Wait, did you download the spreadsheet? Did you make sure you download the spreadsheet? Look at the first video where I'm talking about how to make a budget and manage your money and show you how you can actually download the spreadsheet. I did record the tutorial 3 times and I'm so drained, so let's go straight into it. When you have your spreadsheet, the first thing I want you to do is make another copy. And the reason I want you to do that is because I want you to keep the original for you as a template. When you make your copy, I want you to change the year to the year at hand. And when you open it up, I want you to change this year on the net worth tab to the year it is as well. Now, let's get straight into it. I won't go over these tabs, but basically if you need more help after this tutorial, I've tried to include as much information in the spreadsheet for you to go through the rest of the spreadsheet. You can always watch this tutorial again, of course, and you can watch the first tutorial on the sections on the individual tabs. But again, just know that you have this spreadsheet for yourself. Also, if you ever do have questions and you need some help, you can connect with me on any one of these platforms and just click on them and it'll take you directly to those sites. All right, let's get straight into it. The first template tab is where you're going to include the different categories of your expenses. Now, I'm not going to go through how to actually categorize the transactions that you've downloaded through your credit card statements or your bank account statements because I've done that in the first tutorial or in the first video, so you can just refer back to that one to do that. But that will help you to actually know what your descriptions should be for yourself. I've included the ones that I think a lot of people would likely have. Feel free to change these as you see fit. This is really important as a first step because this template tab feeds into basically the entire template. So you have to make sure that you do this first and make sure it's right for you. Next, as I said in the first tutorial, you have to download your transactions for each month and include them into the appropriate monthly tab. And again, I'm not going to go through it here because I've already done that in the first video, so please refer back to that video to understand how to do that. But again, as a high level, you're going to include all of your transactions under the appropriate month and include the amounts and include the transaction types under here. So whether that's debit, credit card, EFT, cash, whatever, you want to include that in this section. And then this is the reconciliation tab where you're going to pull in all of this information or all of the amounts over here into the reconciliation section here because you want to make sure your totals for this section and this section, so I guess column F, the total of column F, and the total for under column M here are the same. And the reason that's really important is because all of this information has to be captured appropriately or correctly because it flows through to the last 3 tabs, which is what we're going to talk about in this tutorial. Let's go straight into the first tab, the net worth tab. Now there's 3 sections. The first section is assessment of total amounts spent in the year. That is taking the total amounts, so like I said, down here, the F total amount, which is for every single monthly tab in this section here. The next 2 sections are an adjustment. So the outlier expenses, you'll see for each tab at the very top, there's a section for outlier expenses. If, for example, there is some type of expense that you have that you don't expect to have every year, so like a speeding ticket. Let's pretend we got a speeding ticket, $145. We paid for it with our MasterCard, include it in here. That's the same as normal, but we also want to include it in our outlier expenses because we're not expecting to budget having to pay for a speeding ticket. Of course, you do want to budget for some miscellaneous expenses, but you don't want to actually expect to have speeding tickets or anything like that, of course. So what that does is it actually includes it in the outlier expenses tab. And you can see in the adjusted expenses, if we had a bunch more expenses throughout the template here, it would populate in the total, and the adjusted expenses is essentially just taking out the rest of the outlier expenses. So if we had other things like mortgage for 500, and let's say internet, or sorry, this is utilities for 250, and we'll include it in here as well, of course. And we compare the totals, $895, $895. So we're good in here. It's collected all information. We have an outlier expense of $145. You'll see that our total again is $895, but $145 of it was an outlier expense. So our total adjusted expenses is $750. This is going to help us when we do our budget for the following year. You can include a comment in terms of what the outlier expense is, just to remind you what it is. So when you make your budget at the end of the year, you don't have to keep flipping through every single tab to see what the outlier expenses are. So that's this section. The next section is assessment of total cash. We're going to include all of our cash positions in every single bank account that we have, or checking or savings, maybe checks we've received, cash that we have on hand, etc. And we're going to include it in this section. We're going to also take out any cash that has to be spent. So if we have a bunch of expenses in our credit cards, we need to include that, as well as any checks that we have outstanding, or if we owe somebody money, we have to include that here as well. Because this section is going to say, you know, in the past month, we've spent this much money, and it should not belong in our bank account. We just haven't paid it off yet. It's just a timing thing. So you want to include that as well to get your actual ending cash balance. So once we have that, then we're going to go into this section here. This is a really interesting section, at least it is for me. It is your assessment of your total net worth and total liquid assets. So what does that mean? We're going to include all of your assets. So if you don't rent, but you actually own your house or your condo, whatever you live in, or if you have any properties that you maybe rent out yourself, you want to include that in the section. And let's pretend we don't have any rentals. We're going to make this easy and we just live in a house. Let's say that our house, we think it's worth $250,000 based on the market. You're going to include that in here. You do want to update this to whatever the market value is. I don't do that every month, but I mean every 3 to 6 months you can go in there and see what the market value is for comparable homes that have sold near and around you, and include the market values here. Next, I include disposition costs. When you actually go to sell your property, you have to pay your realtor, so you want to remove the disposition costs because you don't actually get the $250. It's going to be $250 less whatever you have to pay your realtor. So in Canada, it is 7% on the first $100,000 and then 3% thereafter. I've included that in here. It automatically populates throughout. If that is not what the realtor fees are in your area, you're going to have to figure that out and include it in this one cell. Next, your mortgages, or your mortgage, you have to include that in here. And because you don't truly own your entire house, the bank owns part of it if you have a mortgage. And you want to just include whatever the balance is at the first of every month. You can see the first of every month is here. Next, you want to include any assets that you have that would be part of your overall net worth. So if you have a retirement fund, if you invest in stocks, if you have any cars, you want to include that in there. Retirement fund and your stocks you want to include at the market value as at the first of each month. The cars, this is just an estimate, an easy way to estimate how much your car is worth, because hypothetically if you were going to trade in your car or sell it before getting a new car, it has value, so you want to include that in your net worth as well. Let's just do an example. Let's say like I have a Honda Civic. let's pretend it's worth $12,000 at the beginning of the year, but at the end of the year, I'm guessing it's worth $9,000. I would include the beginning value and the end value, and the remaining cells automatically populate to show you the decrease in the value of the car. An easy way to figure out what the value is at the beginning and the end is to look at autotrader.com and to find a comparable for your car. So I would be looking for a Honda Civic that is a 2008 for, I think my car is 100 something thousand kilometers, so I'd find something comparable to that. And at the end of the year, I would probably look at a 2007 model and then maybe I'd add 20,000 kilometers onto whatever kilometers I have at the beginning of the year, just to get an assessment of what I think the value would be at the end of the year, just to give me the overall value. And you'll see the last two tabs here actually spit out how much your net worth is. So the first one populates or calculates the entire net worth. The next one calculates your total liquid assets. So your total liquid assets is essentially how much cash or cash equivalents you have. So a cash equivalent would be something like your stocks, because you can quickly sell your stocks and convert it to cash. So that is what a liquid asset is. It is something that is either cash or converts quickly to cash. The reason why I like to include this too is, hypothetically, if anything ever happens, so let's say you have a flood in your house and your insurance doesn't cover all of it, let's say you have a, I don't know, $1,000 deductible or something, you want to know if you can actually pay that off and you have enough cash in the bank to do that. This will give you a quick idea of whether or not you have the cash that you need. So these are a good indication of your financial snapshot as at the first of every month. And another thing, I would do it at December 31st, just so we know what that is. And this value I would likely carry forward as my January 1st value for the following year's template. Next, we're going to go into Analytics tab. I'm not going to go into this tab that much because I've already covered this in the first YouTube video that I have. I'll put a link in the description below so you can look at that video to see how to actually work this tab. But in a nutshell, as you can see, we've as our example, if it's already auto-populated the expenses here, it would do that for every single month, which is again a reason why I like to do the reconciliation tab, to make sure that everything here is actually flowing through the rest of the spreadsheet, because it's going to automatically tabulate the total expenses as you include them. And here's where you can put your budget. And if you ever go over budget, so for example, let's say vehicle related, let's just put in a crazy number for example purposes. Let's put in 2,000. You can see that it's already been highlighted because we've gone over budget. And in here you can just include a comment as to why you spent more than your budgeted amount. So again, I'm not going to go too much into this anymore because you can just refer to the first video. The last tab is the cash flow tab, and I will be the first to say that you may not need to use this tab. It's up to you, but I would highly recommend it if you are an entrepreneur, contractor, or freelancer, or someone who doesn't have a steady flow of income coming into your bank account every 2 weeks or every month, because you have to manage your cash. And this is especially true for businesses, because businesses who don't manage their cash flow well likely don't last very long, because cash is king. Let's get into this. There's two sections. There's a budgeting section and there's the actual section. Of course, in the actual section, you can see you don't have to do anything because it automatically populates all the information, but you do have to include the actual amount of cash coming in at the bottom if you don't get the bi-weekly or monthly steady income down here. Up here, I've included the budgeted section that is from our analytics tab. You can see over here. And the reason I've done that is because I want you to compare how much you've actually included in the yellow sections to make sure that they're equal, if not close to being equal, because the difference here should be as close to zero as possible. You can see that every category isn't necessarily spent the same way month over month. Some of them are, and those are easy. You can just include those as they are spent like that. But some of them, for example, let's say you're paying taxes, and let's say property taxes are in June, maybe you're paying some extra taxes in April. Let's say gifts, you're going to a few weddings in the summer months, you'd include that in there. Oh, maybe you're going to spend a bunch of gifts in December for Christmas. You want to include when the expenses are going to actually be incurred so you can see what the actual cash outflow is. You can see month over month the change. And the reason why this is important is because if you are an entrepreneur, business owner, contractor, or whatever, you want to know how much money you need to pay yourself or make. Because if you do have a cash shortfall, like in this month of September, it's showing a cash shortfall, you have to plan for that. Does that mean you have to pay yourself $4,000 before that? Or does that mean if you're a contractor, you need to take on maybe an extra contract before that? It's really up to you how you deal with it. It's just an indication to you that you have to deal with it. If you scroll down to the bottom, it shows you how much you're actually spending month over month. And so it's up to you when and how much you pay yourself. But let's say you pay yourself at the end of the month, you can, or let's say you pay yourself bi-weekly, you can maybe pay yourself, if you said $3,500 here, pay yourself $15,000 or $1,500 after 2 weeks. And then after that, maybe you don't need the remaining $2,000. Maybe you only want to pay yourself another $500. It's up to you based on your actual expenses. But that's why we have the actual expense tab here, so you can see how you're actually doing in terms of your cash outflow. So again, this tab is really just for you to manage your cash flow and is definitely more useful for individuals who don't have cash flow or steady cash flow coming in. This will help you. Okay, there you have it. You've gone through the entire template. Again, you have all of the resources that you need. You can contact me. You have this spreadsheet, you have the first tutorial, and you have this tutorial, as well as I've tried to color code this so that it's easy for you to understand. Basically, anything in yellow means you can change it, as you can see throughout each tab. And all these yellow, or all these green ones rather, are ones that are calculations. Good luck, have fun, and I'll talk to you later.